Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It arrives with a smile, shakes your hand, supports your ideas, and waits until your defenses are just low enough to make its move. No one understood this more deeply than Machiavelli. He didn't merely analyze betrayal, broke it down, named its structure, and mapped how it spreads through power like a toxin in fine wine undetectable until it's already too late. His insight was simple. Betrayal doesn't strike because you're powerless, it strikes because the early warning signs go unnoticed. Shifts in behavior, subtle red flags, patterns only a tactical mind will catch. That's why Machiavelli warned that the gravest error a leader or anyone with influence can make is to trust too quickly, or worse, to dismiss proof out of emotion. Because betrayal doesn't emerge from your rivals, it comes from those you've drawn too near. Asterisk. That's the reason this content exists. Sharpen your awareness using the same frameworks Machiavelli outlined in The Prince and Discourses on Libby. This isn't about abstract theory or recycled advice. It's about clear signals drawn from real-world betrayal in governments, friendships, partnerships, and power structures. There are 3 behavioral cues that someone might not be with you even if they say they are. The first is what Machiavelli labeled shadow obedience. In The Prince, he points out that people who've been conquered, demoted, or absorbed into your command often fake loyalty. They comply not because they honor your rule, but because they lack the strength to rebel it. They play along, waiting to regain power. He cautions, the harm must be inflicted all at once, so that the enemy cannot recover to retaliate. Put simply, silence doesn't equal loyalty, and agreement doesn't equal alignment. If someone who once debated your ideas now only nods in agreement without offering new perspectives, proceed with caution. What seems like support might be strategy. They're staying quiet until the right moment. Machiavelli illustrated this with Cesare Borgia's rule over Romagna. After taking control, Cesare appointed a cruel governor to execute harsh reforms. Once the dirty work was done, he had the man killed in public to win favor with the people. The key takeaway: people are more afraid of the clever than the cruel, and the clever will pretend to serve you only long enough to replace you. In today's world, this shows up as the coworker who agrees in every meeting but never initiates, the friend who stops offering honest feedback, or the partner who suddenly becomes silent. These aren't signs of harmony. They're calculated pause holding ground until the moment is right. The second cue is excessive communication without substance. Machiavelli stressed that true allies will speak directly, even when it's uncomfortable. Traitors, by contrast, often talk too much while saying very little. In Discourses, he describes how schemers win trust, not through quiet, but through flattery, exaggerated alignment, and frequent check-ins. Their aim isn't to support, it's to gather intel and stay close. He wrote, men are less cautious in offending those who make themselves loved than those who make themselves feared. For love relies on obligation, something that men, in their selfish nature, discard the moment it clashes with personal gain. In plain terms, people abandon loyalty the second it becomes inconvenient, and when they're preparing to do so, they'll often mask it by overcompensating, showering you with flattery, echoing your opinions, and applauding your leadership. But watch carefully, they say everything except where they truly stand. There's no pushback, no challenge, no independent thought. That's not loyalty. It's monitoring. If you fail to recognize it, you'll mistake closeness for safety. But Machiavelli understood this. Closeness increases the threat. Betrayal rarely comes from outsiders, it comes from those who know your routines, your blind spots, your weakest moments. This is why in The Prince, he advises leaders to diffuse power, to never allow a single advisor or subordinate to hold too much influence or familiarity. Because when people rely on you structurally, they're less likely to betray. But the second someone becomes indispensable, they begin measuring your vulnerabilities. That's still true today. The business partner who now applauds every idea but hasn't delivered anything substantial in weeks. The friend who's constantly present but emotionally evasive. The team member who offers praise but no clarity. These aren't signs of commitment, they're symptoms of disengagement disguised as loyalty. These are individuals staying close just long enough to act when you've turned away. The third indicator is more subtle because it's cloaked As progress, it's what Machiavelli called misaligned evolution. He noticed that betrayal doesn't usually stem from anger, it comes when someone's direction shifts and you don't realize it. In discourses, he described how unified political groups often fracture not due to arguments, but because their goals begin to diverge. Once the shared mission fades, unity turns into rivalry. So if someone near you is evolving quickly but no longer in step with your path, be alert. Growth itself isn't a problem, but progress that pulls away from shared values invites eventual conflict. The most dangerous form of betrayal isn't emotional, it's systemic. Two people can once share a vision, but when one starts wanting something the other doesn't recognize, the bond quietly breaks. Rather than address it directly, they maintain appearances. They keep showing up, smiling, participating. But in the background, they're building a future that excludes you. This is how kingdoms fall not through loud mutinies, but through quiet divergence by those once loyal. Ask yourself, who in your circle is advancing in a way you no longer understand? Who is quietly setting up something separate? Who suddenly has drive but no clear direction? That's not mere space, that's drift. And Machiavelli would remind you, drift is the soil where betrayal takes root. Power doesn't collapse overnight, it erodes. Betrayal isn't a single moment, it's an accumulation of signs you chose to overlook. Machiavelli didn't promote paranoia. He promoted pattern awareness. In The Prince, he didn't suggest that leaders should mistrust everyone. He urged them to recognize betrayal in its early subtle form, the type that wears the mask of routine, the type that only becomes visible if you're sharp enough and detached enough to notice. This is where most people stumble. They wait for the betrayal to be undeniable, the obvious backstab, the missed opportunity, the final break. But Machiavelli would warn, if you wait for visible betrayal to take action, you're already too late. Let's examine these indicators more closely and learn how to use them strategically. Start with the first, shadow obedience. This is when someone who once challenged you now simply nods along, when they stop presenting fresh ideas and merely echo yours. It feels like loyalty, but it's just a calculated performance. Machiavelli observed this behavior in royal courts. He knew that a sudden loss of friction wasn't a change of heart, it was a shift in tactics. When feedback vanishes, it's often because real allegiance has too. They're no longer with you, they're stalling, waiting for the right moment to act. And the longer you let it slide, the stronger they become under your shadow. How do you confront this? You test their alignment. Machiavelli advised injecting controlled disruption, change direction, introduce uncertainty, shift the strategy, and then observe. Those who are genuinely loyal will adapt or challenge you constructively. Those who are merely mirroring you will freeze, hesitate, or react with confusion, not out of care, but because their routine has been broken. This is how you bring shadow obedience to the surface through stress that demands real participation, not superficial agreement. Now, let's turn to the second red flag. Overcommunication without substance. This is one of the most deceptive tactics used by traitors. They hover close, stay visibly supportive, shower you with praise and attention, but it all feels hollow. Their words are abundant but empty. You'll sense a lack of substance, like they're performing connection rather than living it. Machiavelli recognized this in the political sphere advisors who appeared loyal only to gather information. Their closeness was strategy, not devotion. And the giveaway? They never take personal risks. Genuine loyalty reveals itself in action, disagreement, and vulnerability. The betrayer never sticks their neck out, they just circle, collect, and wait. So how do you uncover them? You ask for proof, not talk, but action. Assign them a real responsibility. Give them a challenge that requires effort and ownership. Watch how they respond. Machiavelli wrote, "A man will more quickly forget the death of his father than the loss of his inheritance." What he meant, people defend what they truly care about. If someone keeps dodging accountability, it's a signal they either never intended to stay or they've already pledged themselves elsewhere. Let's revisit the third warning sign, misaligned evolution. This one is particularly dangerous because it doesn't come across as a threat. You might convince yourself they're just focused on their own path, and sometimes that's true. But Machiavelli warned against what he described as silent ambition growth that happens without communication, without coordination, and without shared purpose. It progresses quietly, behind closed doors, and by the time it becomes visible, that person is no longer your ally, they're your rival, armed with insider knowledge. This pattern was common in Florentine politics. Individuals who once served under powerful leaders would quietly rise in influence, form new connections, and then make their move once the leadership was distracted. The betrayal wasn't abrupt, the clues were always present, but no one took them seriously until it was too late. So how do you recognize misaligned evolution before it costs you? Pay attention to shifts in language. People preparing to outgrow you begin to use different vocabulary. They start referencing goals that don't include you. Their tone becomes detached. They speak more of my strategy than our direction. They begin sounding like guests in a space they helped create. It's subtle, but Machiavelli would urge you to listen careful because once it's said out loud, the decision has already been made. How do you test their alignment? Bring the vision back to the center. Ask directly, here's where I'm headed. Are you still on board? And then watch not their reply, but their energy. Does it harmonize or does it falter? That hesitation is not trivial, it's a warning crack. And every unnoticed crack becomes a break. Now here's the hard truth Machiavelli never softened. Most people, even after seeing the signs, still don't act. Why? Because betrayal feels personal. And when emotions are involved, people stall. They hope. They cling to old memories. They wait for undeniable proof. But Machiavelli didn't operate emotionally, he operated with precision. He wrote, "Men must be either cherished or destroyed." His point? Partial loyalty is a liability. There's no such thing as halfway allegiance. If someone near you is hesitating, performing, or drifting and you let it slide, you're enabling betrayal to take root. So you must move not with rage or fear, but with control, detachment, and, if needed, removal. You don't explain. You don't plead. You don't try to persuade. You simply change the environment so that they no longer occupy a position of influence. This is the Machiavellian method, not cruelty, but clarity. The strongest action isn't punishing betrayal after it happens. It's identifying it before the traitor even knows you've noticed, and ensuring their weapon is never drawn. You don't wait for the attack, you design your world so the attack cannot succeed. That was Machiavelli's foundational insight. Because in power, once someone is in position to strike, it's already too late. What keeps a leader secure isn't foresight. Most people don't prepare. They assume loyalty because of time served, shared victories, or silent trust. But longevity doesn't equal loyalty. And shared history doesn't guarantee shared allegiance. Often, the ones most likely to betray you are the people who've studied you the longest, who understand your rhythms, your pressure points, your vulnerabilities. Machiavelli once wrote, "A prudent ruler should be wary of accepting the loyalty of those who have boldly betrayed others, as that same boldness can be turned against him." In today's language, if someone defected to join you, don't be surprised when they do it again for someone more powerful. Which brings us to a lesser-known but critical warning sign: loyalty without roots. You've seen this character, the opportunist who changes sides with ease, who flatters you today but mocks someone else yesterday, who joins your circle quickly after falling out with another. They present it as reinvention, as redemption. But Machiavelli would caution, be wary of the fighter who left his last leader not out of injustice, but out of habit. His loyalty is not to people, but to advantage. He stands with you only because you're ahead. Lose that edge, and he disappears. Of quote. In The Prince, Machiavelli used the mercenary armies of Renaissance Italy to illustrate this point. He warned that rulers who leaned on hired soldiers, those who fought for pay, not principle, inevitably failed. Mercenaries don't fight for belief. They fight for reward. And the moment danger outweighs benefit, they vanish. Your modern-day mercenaries don't carry swords. They smile, nod, and mirror your moves. Until they don't, as soon as your worth dips, they move on. How do you spot this betrayal early? Simple. Study their past. Machiavelli believed past actions, not good intentions, are the best indicators of future loyalty. Ask yourself, how did this person get here? Did they arrive driven by shared vision or out of rejection elsewhere? Did they help you build from nothing, or did they show up after the success was visible? Because those who join only once you've won will be the first to vanish when you lose. The deeper lesson here is this: loyalty is not measured by proximity, it's measured by sacrifice. If someone has never paid a price for standing with you, they haven't proven they'll do it when it matters. Machiavelli was blunt. He who will not endure hardship for your benefit will never fight for you in loss. So test it not publicly, but wisely. Introduce small inconveniences, tiny costs, make support slightly difficult. See who stays when it's no longer effortless. That's your actual circle. Now, let's clear up a dangerous mythone that has ruined more leaders than any enemy has. The idea that good intentions protect you from betrayal. They don't. Machiavelli never sugarcoated this. He saw commanders and kings fall because they believed loyalty came from decency, ethics, or moral alignment. But he wrote, "Men are thankless, inconsistent, dishonest, and deceitful not out of malice, but because loyalty bends to interest. And when interests shift, so does allegiance." So here's the hard truth. Someone can be generous with you, laugh beside you, weep with you, and still turn against you. Not from spite, but from calculated advantage. You're not safe because they like you. You're only safe if betraying you offers no advantage. That's why Machiavelli focused on building frameworks, not feelings. He didn't put his faith in people, he relied on systems, accountability, leverage points. He believed that anyone in power should be surrounded not by emotional loyalty, but by structural dependency, not by affection, but by strategic necessity. That leads to the next principle. Once you identify the Singh shadow compliance, vague overcommunication, misaligned ambition, or shallow loyalty, you don't sit back and hope for the best. You act. You reorganize. You cut off their options. In The Prince, Machiavelli recounts the rise of Agathocles of Syracuse, who climbed from a commoner to absolute ruler through cold, strategic decisions. When his top commanders became too close, too confident, too comparable, remove them. Not out of hatred, but out of strategic necessity. Because familiarity breeds entitlement, and entitlement paves the way for betrayal. But in today's world, you don't need to destroy anyone, you just need to detach them from power. You limit their reach, divide their roles, spread out their control. You don't allow unchecked influence. You pull them out of the shadows, not to humiliate, but to neutralize their ability to act. Here's the final principle in this phase. Your power must be constructed so that betrayal becomes meaningless, not because it can't happen, but because it won't succeed. Let them scheme. Let them smile in silence. Let them think they're being clever. But if your system is fortified, your allies are vetted, and your direction is firm, their betrayal won't land, it will collapse. Like a dagger snapping against steel. The most damaging betrayal isn't the one that surprises you, it's the one you rationalize. You feel a tone shift, a brief disengagement, a glance that doesn't match the momentan your instincts flare. But instead of acting, you downplay it. You make excuses. You tell yourself they're just tired or it's probably nothing, because facing it would require action. Machiavelli would call that softness. And softness is what brings down even the strongest rulers. He saw this cycle over and over again throughout history. Intelligent, capable, powerful individuals undone not by enemies, but by their refusal to confront the uncomfortable truth that loyalty fades. In discourses, he explained how the Roman Republic didn't fall in a diet eroded. The alliances that once held firm slowly unraveled. Leaders stayed passive, believing old bonds would hold. They didn't. The collapse came because no one responded when the loyalty began to slip. So ask yourself, what are you choosing to ignore? What shift are you brushing aside because it's easier not to ask hard questions? What behavioral change are you pretending not to see because acknowledging it would be disruptive? That's the moment betrayal takes root, when your silence replaces your judgment. Machiavelli had no sympathy for those who ignored signs to protect their feelings. He believed in catching disloyalty before it strikes not with fear, but with focused observation and preemptive clarity. Machiavelli urged leaders to constantly test, observe, and destabilize not out of malice, but out of necessity. Because power isn't safeguarded by affection, it's preserved through foresight and control. One of his harshest insights: a wise ruler should not honor commitments when doing so harms his own interests. It may sound ruthless at first glance, but it's not a celebration of treachery. It's a reality check. Loyalty is conditional. Even your most trusted allies will pivot if the incentives shift far enough. The mistake? Believing loyalty is stable. It's not. It changes direction with opportunity. That's why Machiavelli constantly emphasized, don't rely on sentimentally on structure. If someone is with you simply because they have no better option, they're a risk. The moment a better offer arrives, they're gone. But someone who remains loyal because the cost of betrayal outweighs the reward, that's someone you can truly count on. His strategy was twofold: recognize shifting loyalties early and design systems where disloyalty becomes too expensive. Here's what that looks like in the real world. Suppose someone close to you begins pulling back. Their involvement fades. Their feedback becomes rehearsed. You don't confront them emotionally. Don't ask, "Are we okay?" That opens the door for manipulation. Instead, apply pressure, reassign duties, restrict information flow, tighten their access to key decisions, reconfigure their incentives, build an environment where staying loyal brings more value, betrayal brings loss. Not as punishment, but as structure. You're not being reactive. You're making betrayal unappealing by design. Machiavelli observed this principle in how military power was managed. He noted that successful rulers never allowed a single general or advisor to hold too much sway. He respected Ferdinand of Aragon for constantly shifting his alliances, keeping every power center unstable and uncertain. It wasn't paranoia, it was systemic design. To Machiavelli, power was less about fear and more about structure, using design to shape behavior. Take a modern example. If you run a business, don't give one partner unchecked authority. Always create overlap and backup. And if someone begins acting strangely, pull back one resource, delay one privilege, shuffle one responsibility. Watch the response. Do they engage, clarify, realign, or do they distance themselves further? That reaction tells you everything. Here's how betrayal usually reveals itself before it happens. Conversation becomes cloudy, flattery ramps up, initiative fades, quiet independence grows, and transparency disappears. Suddenly, they stop sharing what they used to. You sense they're building something quietly, but you're not sure what. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. And Machiavelli's ultimate test was this: does this person still draw strength from your leadership, or are they preparing for your downfall? If it's the latter, the betrayal has already begun, even if they haven't made their move yet. This is where most people go wrong. They react emotionally. They lash out, confront, accuse. But that's not how power is preserved. The Machiavellian move is quiet recalibration. No explanations. No debate. Just restructuring. You shift the board until the betrayer is surrounded by irrelevance alone, exposed, with no influence, without a single word exchanged. Here's the deeper play. If you build your world in a way where betrayal always costs more than it rewards, they won't risk it. This is how you stay protected, not by relying on blind loyalty, but by engineering loyalty as the most beneficial path forward. And if they still choose to betray, let them, because if you've done this correctly, by the time they move against you, there's nothing left for them to gain. Once you've spotted a likely traitor when the signals align and your gut is certain, the worst reaction is a rash one. Betrayal requires poise, precision. React too fast and you give up your strategic edge. React emotionally and you hand them control. Machiavelli wasn't just a tactician, he was a master of timing. He believed the moment of greatest vulnerability is when a threat doesn't yet realize it's been seen. That's when the betrayer is still performing, still revealing their hand, still confident in their invisibility. In The Prince, Machiavelli highlighted how Cesare Borgia dealt with treachery not by jumping on it, but by letting it unfold until the betrayal was unmistakable. Only then did he act publicly, decisively, permanently. Why? Because exposing a traitor without consequence only sharpens their future attacks. The real tactic is to wait not out of leniency, but to bait a trap. If someone close is heading toward betrayal, trust that their pride will eventually push them too far. And when it does, don't confront, don't warn, don't negotiate. You just cut off the terrain beneath their feet. Remove their access, redirect their influence. Rewrite the structure until they have no leverage left. Do it before they even notice. That's the Machiavellian art of preemptive exile, eliminating the threat without direct conflict. Here's a vivid example Machiavelli himself used. Girolamo Savonarola, a friar who briefly ruled Florence after the fall of the Medici. He ruled by spiritual fear and gained a devoted following. But once he lost the Pope's support, he believed his people would stay loyal out of love. He was wrong. Machiavelli famously wrote, "He who builds power on the people must know how to adjust when the people shift." Savonarola didn't adjust. He clung to love as a safeguard. And when his opponents moved, he had no infrastructure to support him just sentiment. He was captured, tortured, and executed. His ashes scattered into the Arno. The takeaway? Never count on affection to keep you safe. Build systems that end your even when trust does not. So when you sense betrayal forming, here's your move. Don't sever ties suddenly that makes noise. It gives them a story to tell, a reason to retaliate, and a spotlight. Instead, begin the quiet fade, reassign their responsibilities, cut their access to key information, introduce new trusted people around them, gradually shift your alliances. Make their presence non-essential, then invisible. They'll notice eventually, but they won't react right away. A strategic betrayer doesn't panic until their platform starts to disappear. And by the time they confront you, you've already redesigned the world they once relied on. Machiavelli called this the preemptive purge, not through aggression, but through design. You don't confront them, you don't attack. You just dismantle the space they use to influence. You erase the context where they once held power. Now let's go even further. Machiavelli also advocated for making examples when necessary and with finality. In his study of Roman leadership, he showed how order was preserved not through leniency, but through sharp, unforgettable consequences when betrayal was clear and public. He wrote, "A ruler must strike so thoroughly that there's no need to strike again. If someone betrays you openly, if their action is visible, the damage significant, and the message contagious, then the response must be calculated, complete, and conclusive. Not for vengeance, but to make a statement. You don't yell. You don't threaten. You remove them so effectively, so unmistakably, that others never consider repeating the mistake. Because power doesn't defend itself, it signals deterrence. Silent authority doesn't mean inactive. Sometimes, it must resonate." How does this look in practical terms? Suppose someone undercuts your company, leaks plans, steals clients, or sabotages your relationships. You could lash outer, as Machiavelli would advise. You sever their access, reveal their flaws quietly, and use the situation as a lesson. Loyalty is non-negotiable. Not to humiliate, but to reinforce your position. You don't have to destroy anyone, you just need to make betrayal look like the most foolish choice they could have made. And here's the final instruction from Machiavelli. Once you've neutralized the betrayer, remove the past not from your thoughts, but from the system. In The Prince, he wrote, "When taking control of a state, all necessary injuries must be inflicted at once." What does that mean? It means that once you act completely. Don't leave remnants. Don't speak their name. Don't revisit the conflict. Don't let the bridge smolder. Burn it down decisively. Because a lingering traitor, even as a memory, encourages imitation. But their total erasure sends a far stronger signal. Loyalty is demanded, betrayal erased.